thanks everyone for coming. Really appreciate it. I'm Drew Oetting. I'm one of the founding partners of a venture capital group called 8VC, which is based in San Francisco. One of the core tenets of what we do is we invest in what we call the smart enterprise, but basically those are the technologies that are modernizing older world industries, and we're very sort of thematic around verticals when we do that. I guess thank you, Jamie Montgomery, for putting this all together, putting us all on stage, and thank you very much to all of his staff for all the incredibly hard work that I know they do behind the scenes. So I thought to get started, if everyone could just give an introduction of who you are, what you do, and if you're a startup, maybe the end markets that you look to serve, and if you are at a more corporate group, the strategic initiatives that you're working on.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I'm Mark Johnson. I'm CEO and co-founder of Descartes Labs. We are building a model of the Earth with satellite imagery and other sorts of remote sense data. So with the model of the Earth, the things that you target typically are large industrial supply chains, so understanding supply and demand at scale. So we've done a lot of work, for example, in agriculture and other industries like that.
Good morning, Andy Bane. I'm the CEO of Element Analytics. We're a San Francisco-based enterprise SaaS company, and we provide not the analytics, but we make the analytics possible for industrial companies. And so you can think of us as the point of data aggregation and data quality for all the operations data across really a number of markets that we serve: oil and gas, pulp and paper. We're sort of agnostic to vertical manufacturing, so both discrete and process industries. In full disclosure, one of my investors and board observers is sitting to my left, so I'll try to behave.
Good morning, I'm Murray Grainger. I lead Honeywell Ventures, which is a newly formed venture arm of Honeywell. The segments that we look at mainly are aerospace and defense, process and petrochemical plants, warehouse automation, and also home and building technology. So, very, very wide portfolio, which is global. So tough to pick out one initiative, but it's a pretty good representation of the global economy.
That's right. So I thought we'd get started. I think when we talk about probably technologies in general, but especially enterprise technologies, there's a lot of hype around AI or machine learning or things like that. But I think when you get into it, the realities are probably a lot less sexy. Mark, you have a term of the data refinery. I was wondering if maybe you could sort of kick off a conversation around data collection, integration, structuring, and then we can kind of move it down the line and get people's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of history about the company. So 3 years ago, we started off with a lot of satellite imagery, and we wanted to do something valuable with it. And it turns out that satellite imagery is quite large. We have 10 petabytes of data in our archive now. We pull in 15 terabytes of new data every day. And just managing that data, accessing that data, being able to throw a massive amount of compute at that data is a huge challenge. Cleaning up the data is very difficult. So, for example, the Earth is covered in clouds, about 60% at any given moment. And of course, those are bad pixels because you can't see through clouds. So we spend an inordinate amount of time building the infrastructure that allows for analytics. So of course, we have customers where we build solutions on top of this platform that we've built. But I think there's a fantasy in the world that you can just throw a bunch of AI at large data sets and hope that some magic comes out of it. But in reality, there is a lot of time that needs to be spent on the infrastructure in order to enable those analytics.
Mm-hmm. And we see much the same thing. We've seen a lot of failure where companies have taken a lot of data off of their different industrial sites, their plants, their factories, their refineries, whatever, thinking that they can just drop it on a Hadoop store and do magic big data things. And what they realize is that it's very hard data to work with. And you not only have to be able to structure that data and give it context, particularly when we're talking about sensor data, which really doesn't have a lot of context around it. But then if you're going to do analytics with it, engineers and operators in the plants, they won't adopt those analytics if they don't trust those analytics. So it's in part an infrastructure problem, but as well, the data quality issues and the drift issues associated with industrial data are far greater than those in the software-generated data world that we're so used to hearing about AI and machine learning. And so you have to fundamentally approach things differently in order to build the confidence of those who are consuming the data via analytics.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the level of maturity of a lot of our customers and the plants in which they operate, data visualization would be a great thing to have, let alone any form of AI or any advanced analytics on top of that. So there's a very wide spectrum of needs and maturity, and being able to apply solutions to those particular points are very important. There isn't a one-size-fits-all shop of AI that you can go to, and that's part of the reason why we invested in Andy and his team is that they're really good at just cleaning up data and getting it to a point where you can actually start doing something useful with it.
Murray, when you think about, obviously at Honeywell you have an unbelievable amount of potential data that you could be trying to effectively onboard into the organization. So how do you prioritize it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and we've really set up what we call connected enterprises across the company. So we got initiatives in the connected aircraft, the connected plant, the warehouse, and the worker. And so we sort of really try to divide the world up into those 4 key pieces. And if you really sort of boil Industry 4.0 down for us, it's a overused term in general. For us, we think about new to the world software and data analytics solutions that aren't really attached to our hardware. So for us, it's about $1.5 billion out of $40 billion, right? So to give an order of magnitude of what we think it is, that for us is growing at about 20-25% a year. So it's growing at a good clip. But it's really, dispersed across probably 75 different offerings to specific customers, because specific customers need very, very, domain-specific solutions. So again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's a lot of very, very point solutions for us.
Interesting. And Mark and Andy, you both operate in similar verticals, but even you mentioned just geospatial data. There's a huge amount of complexity around that one very specific type. So how do you think about approaching building data analytics companies as it relates to actual domains that you approach and the corresponding data sets that you work with?
Yeah, I think the first things you need to do are build the systems when you're dealing with enormous amounts of data to go store and access that data at scale and to process that data at scale. And for us, that's the core infrastructure that we've built, and it just happens to be satellite data today. But we think about all sorts of spatially aware data that you could eventually ingest into the system. So it's really about starting that infrastructure that's flexible enough to deal with different data types. I mean, already we found that, of course, we can build, for example, crop production models with satellite data that are very accurate. But if you combine those production models with customer data and can put that all in the same system, you get much more accurate models. So their modeling capabilities plus our data is much more powerful than either of them alone.
When we work with customers, we have an attitude, leave no sensor behind, get all the data that's available and see how you can make it useful. And we really take more of an abundance approach. And our team on the R&D side mostly comes out of Quantcast, Twitter, Facebook, Google, places like that. And so it's not really big data to them. It's sort of small and medium data in industrials. And so that part is not intimidating for them. What the real challenge is these industrial companies, 2 to 6 years to design and build an asset, and then they operate it for 50. And the data is spread out all over the place. And if you're a company like BP, and you say, all right, I have 33 offshore oil and gas platforms, and I want to sort of singularly deploy predicts, and I have all these anomaly applications and all these other things that I want to do, you fundamentally have to be able to bring all the data that can provide the context in order to support the engineers and the operators and to support all those different use cases. And so that requires not only scale, but transforming the data in a way that allows them to get off of spreadsheets and just deal with the reality of the data at that sort of scale. And so what we see is companies that really have many, many different use cases, but they need a singular way to get at the data, and they won't be able to scale the analytics if they can't do it.
Maybe to pivot away from data and talk more about go-to-market, which is obviously another big problem when you're dealing with larger companies. Maybe just talk about the way that you've thought about engaging with customers, the challenges you've seen, but also maybe the opportunities or the changes that you've seen in that engagement model, and then we can get Murray's opinion on how he likes to engage with early stage companies.
Go-to-market industrials. Okay, so they're operating critical infrastructure, and they're not. You're not going to roll in with a freemium model that you upsell when you're touching the crown jewels of their data. In fact, even though we're deployed on Azure and we're architected to be multi-tenant and we're SaaS, we deliver our software into our customers' Azure tenant. So you can think of it as shrink-wrapped SaaS. And so you have to have a go-to-market that builds the confidence in that end user that you can deliver for them, but give them the modicum of control that they need and the security that they need around their data and around their systems, because they're bringing this all up from the edge. It's the first time that they're really bringing things to the cloud. And so you have to have a level of maturity around that. The second thing is you have to be able to speak in their language. You have to understand that when you get to the business side, they're talking about things like reliability and mechanical integrity, and they're talking about their use cases as it associates with the data. And you can't just hire SaaS athletes, salespeople. You have to have some people who have the maturity and the domain experience to be able to have that conversation with the customers. So we think that's super important as well.
Yeah, so we're a spin out of Los Alamos National Laboratory. There's a lot of astrophysicists on the team, and our first market was agriculture. To convince the agricultural market that we had some value, the first thing we had to do was go prove that we could do something. So we built a corn production model for the U.S. When we released our number, we moved the price of corn 3% in the wrong direction, and it bounced right back. But suddenly, traders that weren't taking our calls before started taking our calls because we had demonstrated some expertise. And what we found in working with our larger customers like Cargill is that they're really more partners, right? Where we deeply understand their business. So we have the expertise in the big data and machine learning. They have the expertise in the supply chain and understanding how grain trading works. And that combination is really important. That I think you have to approach this with a bit of humility with your customer. That of course, we don't know everything, and sure, we believe this technology is going to disrupt the world. But Cargill, for example, has been around for 150 years, so there's a lot of institutionalized knowledge. So deeply embedding with the customer really helps a technology company like ours to better understand not just that customer, but the industry in its whole.
I agree with everything these guys said. I mean, it really comes down to the ability to have that very deep discussion at a domain-specific level. Because people like Honeywell, we've got 20, 30, 50-year relationships with the oil majors or critical infrastructure folks, and you don't want to risk that relationship. You don't want to bring in someone who's not fully vetted, who can't speak the language, who can't be a true partner. So that really, really tight connection and ability to roll sleeves up, get into the weeds of what that customer is really trying to solve and what I think some of the pain points are is very, very critical. And we screen a lot of companies that we meet just based on the ability to talk the talk and walk the walk, honestly.
How do you think about evolving Honeywell's engagement model as more and more earlier stage businesses try to work with you or work with your customers?
Yeah, we need to really up our game in terms of allowing other companies and folks into our ecosystem and just be a really good partner. I don't think corporates are naturally built to have that partnership model and embrace people from the outside. There's a little bit of a not invented here syndrome sometimes, which I think we are breaking down, and I think that starts at the top of the organization. We've got a lot of strong support from the top in terms of we really want to work with the startup community and other technologies, and I think Andy's seeing that in real time, and perhaps he can give you some perspectives on what it's like to work with a company like Honeywell. But it's something that's absolutely critical for us to get right. Otherwise, I think it's going to be not a very good story for companies like Honeywell.
And I guess this will be a question where you can attack me as a VC. So what is it about, what is it that venture capitalists and investors in general maybe are the most wrong about as it relates to either the types of businesses that you're building?
It's gotten better now, but a question I used to hate when I was racing was, what's your secret sauce? And the expectation was some algorithm that I would tell them about. They didn't want to hear that the secret sauce was the ability to manage and process large amounts of data. There's a secret sauce there, but it's not as sexy as saying that you've got a magic algorithm that's going to predict corn and predict soy production.
Yeah, it's much the same for me. That they have an expectation that they'll talk about how you can connect the algorithm to the balance sheet and the income statement for these large companies. And the reality is it's just there's a lot of hard work that has to be done. I think that they also don't know how to predict the behavior of the customers that we serve. That's been a bit of a challenge. I mean, one of the reasons it's a bit unusual to take on as many strategics as we did in our A round, but we took on Honeywell, GE, ABB, Mitsui, and then Astor Capital really only has 3 limited partners, including Schneider Electric. We wanted to work with investors who not only represented a point of sale opportunity for us and a partner, but who understood the problem we're going after and who could predict the behavior of the customers. And so I think that's where sort of the financial VCs need to come up the learning curve a little bit. There's a bit of a challenge understanding in depth what those industrial problems really are. And
for our Series A, it was led by Cultivian Sandbox, which is a Chicago-based firm founded by a former CEO of Monsanto. And all their LPs are big ag companies, and that's really helped us a lot. We figured we weren't sure exactly what the product was going to be in agriculture, but if we had some VCs behind us who really understood that space, who could introduce us to the right people, who understood the sales cycle, would help us, and they certainly have been great partners.
Or what do you see? What is the biggest mistake?
I think it's really that it's the ability to understand and be comfortable with the sales cycles that are just inherently longer within industrials. I think it takes longer, but once you're in, it is extremely sticky and it becomes a little bit of an annuity, and then you can really sort of build value, significant value over time. But there's always going to be a longer curve, and we're comfortable with that. And I think in a way, some financial VCs just need to get comfortable that we understand it and we can partner, and that we can be a good resource in that process. I think that's the biggest disconnect I see today.
So I'm hearing sales cycle. How's the video? Good. All right. I'm hearing sales cycle, and Mark and Andy, when you've been building your businesses, do you think about building your sales teams differently because the sales cycle are longer, or the number of opportunities that you kind of approach in a different way?
Yeah, I think for us, it's a consultative engagement model where we're building a platform on which people can build complex models. However, in order to use that system, you have to have the skills, a bit of machine learning, a bit of Python. These are not skills that you typically find in large agricultural companies. So there's always going to be a consultative model there. So our sales cycles are long. It requires really deeply understanding the customer's business. So it's not just about going in and selling a product. It's about having a conversation with the customer, understanding what their problems are, and being able to convince them that you can uniquely solve them. So yeah, it's a complex sales cycle.
Yeah, I'd second that. It's very much a conceptual sell. Industrials, they all want to be the first to go second, right? So they can be a little slow. So what we've really done is started to perfect the whole rapid proof of concept, proof of value, and really drive that through as part of the sales cycle, where on a paid basis you can get their hands on the software and prove some value. But getting them to that point as well does take some selling. I think that one of the things that's really happened is all these decisions were primarily made at the individual site and at the plant. And you've got all these engineering systems. Now they've suddenly, the executive returns from Davos and he says, I want to do analytics. And now IT is responsible enterprise-wide, but they don't know anything about engineering systems. And it's not malicious on behalf of the folks operating at the sites and the plant managers, but they've got a huge mess on their hands, and IT doesn't know what to do about that. And so you have to help them through that journey and getting to the cloud. And if you can help them with faster cycles on that, then it is very consultative, as you said, and that can help speed things up for sure.
That's great. Well, I got maybe one more question, and this one maybe we'll try to leave with some controversy. So what is the most overhyped technology or concept or topic area you think in the Industry 4.0?
I think deep learning. We, oddly enough, the technology that we spun out of Los Alamos was deep learning technology. And about 8 months in, one of my scientists is like, please take it off the website. We don't use any right now. Again, I think that my problem with it is it's a very useful technique, and we use it all over our problems right now. But it's seen as a panacea that's just going to solve a problem. You throw a bunch of data at deep learning, and you get this magical algorithm. It's got a lot of problems. You need a lot of training data in order for it to work. It's a black box, so if you're trying to convince your customer that they should actually believe the numbers that are popping out, you can't really convince them because it's hard to look and see what it's actually thinking. So I think that though deep learning is going to be an important tool in the toolbox of people doing machine learning and AI, it's just one of many tools. Sometimes a good old linear regression is what the doctor ordered.
Yeah, I second. I mean, it's fun to say convolutional neural network, but it's really hard to do, so second.
I think IoT platform is probably one of the most overused terms, and I think we're up, counting hundreds and hundreds of IoT platforms that are out there, but there isn't a one-size-fits-all platform for anything. It's application by application, problem by problem. You can plug in different tools that perhaps you could scale across a corporation or people can share, but there isn't. I don't believe that there is an IoT platform to go and solve the world's problems.
Right. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being
Thank you.